Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. How are y'all doing? Good. I am wonderful. Just every day going through my routine, you know, trying to get through it all. But one thing that has changed is school has already started for my kids. Whew. But it's homeschooling, uh, distance learning online. My two youngest have their own space set up, have their own desks set up separately from each other so they can each do their own thing. And so far, it's been going pretty well, thankfully. My husband is still going to work, well, working from home, which is, we're just trying to find something to do, keep ourselves busy. I celebrated my birthday last week, 1 year older, uh, more gray, and my roots here. Yeah, I like that. 1 year wiser. That's true. That's better. So the celebration was really lovely. There was a birthday surprise video that so many people contributed to that I hadn't seen in a while. People from far, from near. It was really a nice birthday present. But everyone was healthy and just going along with everything. That was nice. So yesterday, Sunday, no, it was Saturday. Wait, so the 29th, 30th? Yeah. So I also celebrated my 27-year anniversary of my wedding. Feel very blessed for that. And yeah, that's all for me. How about the rest of you? Liz say, well, hello. Nice. My background is a little different than it has been. Maybe you're wondering why. It's because I just moved. I moved to Chicago. My hometown. It's so beautiful here. But yeah, it's a big change. And I'm so excited to be home again. So, we're getting there with getting the place set up. And we also just celebrated my birthday. 1 year older. Yeah, yeah, I am. Just becoming more wise. That's it. That's it. Not older, just wiser.
Yeah.
Liz, come on, say it again. Come on. Do you want me to say how old I am? No, just say what we always say. What is it? Come on. Oh, Marley and I are always saying we celebrate 2 days together with the same age. And then after on my birthday becomes 1 year older. And what else? Yeah. So I'm older than all of you now. But you know what? It's just a number. The important thing is I feel great. I feel happy. Yeah. So my birthday, you know, stayed home for 14 days. That was my birthday. And, I'm happy. Alexis is saying, I mean, really for me, the big change was um, my last kid left home, drove to college about a couple days ago. It's been going really well so far. I mean, but with quarantine and COVID, everything, I mean, I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but so far, so good. Yeah. Wendy, go ahead. Hello. It's nice to see y'all again. I did not celebrate my birthday last week. The only interesting thing that's happened is that
Got
um,
stung by a bee on my calf, and I ended up getting a swollen calf and had to stay home for a few days. So that was my first and last experience. Oh, Reed, I can't hear you. I this is Liz speaking. I remember a wasp. Marley, do you remember this in Mexico? A wasp ended up stinging me on my arm, and my arm was so swollen I couldn't even sign. I mean, that's been my last time I've been to Mexico so far. So we have something really exciting coming up. You can probably see an ASL interpreter read here. Oh, there's some tech issues. Okay, so we can't hear read. I'm sorry, there's some hearing people problems, apparently. Should we go ahead and just, we're gonna go ahead and switch interpreters. Read, you can go ahead and turn your video off for the time being. Okay, all right. So now, speaking of interpreters, we see Jacinda here. Welcome. Now, the audience, you may be wondering why we have an interpreter with us today. And we have a special, very special episode today. And I am very excited and looking forward to this episode. And I'm sure you all will too. And now let's just dive right in. Now, I just want to introduce someone who will come on momentarily. The name is Oliver Stabb. And Oliver's pronouns is they and he. They, he is the pronouns that they use. My pronouns that I use are hers and she. You all ladies are the same? Yes, we're all the same. She, her pronouns. She, her, and hers. I don't know if that's the correct order here, but these are our pronouns. Anyway, Oliver Stabb is an activist and a public health researcher committed to the advancements of social, economic, racial, gender, deaf, and disability justice. He currently is pursuing a master's in public health at UC Berkeley. And he is a longtime communications team member of Trans Life, which is the only hotline, trans hotline ran by trans people for trans people. Oliver works recently at Lambda Legal Defense and Educational Fund, working towards an inclusive background and advocating for the LGBTQ community, as well as the youth justice system. Oliver is passionate about accessibility, transgender, inclusive, massive mental health, and prison abolition. And he loves fun facts. So I recently got to know Oliver within the last month, and I find him just a wonderful human being. I'm really proud that he was willing to be with us today. He will be our guest host for today, and he will be taking over our platform. And he will be discussing with 3 other guests who identify as trans, deaf, and the 4 of them are going to have a conversation with each other. And us as an audience will watch. We're going to be open, learn, listen, and support the trans world and all of it that's within it, all of us together. Now, before I invite Oliver to our show, I just wanted to say a quote that I found profound. And the quote is, "I express pride by being out. I love being myself every day, and I will not minimize who I am, and I will be more than glad to share myself with the world." End quote. And that's a powerful message. And Alexis is saying this applies to everyone for sure. Now, let's welcome Oliver. Hello, hello. Thank you for having me, Mrs. Marley. Thank you for coming on. Now, I've already said briefly about who you are, Oliver. And Oliver, feel free to, you can say some more and add some more things, but I don't want to waste any more time. I just find this fascinating, treasurable, and before we let go and give you the platform, I just had a few questions for you. Bring it on. Well, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Liz to ask the first question. Liz? Oliver, you are a graduate student at UC Berkeley in Northern California. So what's your major? What are you studying there? Sure, I'm pursuing my master's in public health. Specifically, I would like to do more studies about social biases, barriers, and how all of that influences people. Specifically, the gender minority. Often they are not provided for or supported and are experiencing discrimination, and is directly impacted with mental health issues. And so what society thinks about gender, race, sexuality, all of that social norm, so to speak, influences the everyday person. Oh, well, when do you graduate, Oliver? Well, I haven't even started. I just, I just started actually. I'm sorry. One day at a time, Alexis is speaking, taking it one thing at a time. And Marley is speaking here. I think you plan to be there for 2 years, right? Yes. Yeah. So, all right. I guess after graduation, we'll ask. Wendy, you had a question. Yes. So Marley mentioned this in the introduction, but do you mind explaining a little more about your organization, Trans Life Lifeline? Can you explain how that works for someone who identifies as deaf and trans? Well, yeah, it first started out as a hotline. People who needed help in regards to mental health or any crisis that they're dealing with, they would get connected with another trans person. Often, people in the community would try to reach out for help, and typically the other person on the other side wouldn't relate or not understand where this person is coming from that's going through the struggles, and ultimately just not offer any help. And so now that hotline kind of transformed into a trans hotline. And so we actually provide funds for trans people to obtain their licenses, to just thrive in the social world. And right now, there is no system set up for specifically the trans hotline. Interpreter missed that, but not everyone who calls the hotline has the same exact experience with their identity. So it's all different. Wendy speaking, thank you for sharing that. I mean, especially nowadays with the pandemic going on and all of these social crises happening, this hotline is really crucial. And this is Oliver speaking. Yes, that is very crucial, especially what's going on in today's times. And it'll be specifically harder for people who are already struggling with mental health pre-COVID. And so with this on top of it. And Marley saying, yes, I mean, with this pandemic, it really is hard. Interpreter missed that, so I just wanted to post that. This is Alexis speaking. So obviously from your work, Oliver, thus far, you're very immersed in politics and policies, and what policies should look like. I'm curious to know what your top three changes to policies you would like to see? This is Oliver speaking. Well, recently we had a big win for the trans community. So the U.S. Supreme Court heard the first case of gender identity, and that a transgender person would be under protection. So meaning there's no discrimination against for work, for obtaining work. And there's a lot of trans people who can't even get jobs because there are things, important things like housing, credit, things like that. And there's like a financial barrier for these people in the community. And there's also like, discrimination against people towards sexual orientation. And so if they're not passing, they decided to pass the Equality Act, and which means that anyone in a spectrum would not experience discrimination in the workplace. Anyone who has like a legal sex on their license, they're not allowed to change it. And so there's been lots of like obstacles and barriers that can be scary for a trans person. For example, if someone were to get pulled over and their license doesn't fit their sex that the officer may see, I mean, you're in for a dangerous situation. And there are several examples of situations like that that have happened. And this is Alexis speaking. That is very important to know. And Marley's saying, we have a lot more work to do and look forward to working with you. And one thing that I like to do, other than being in the entertainment business, is to do charity work. Fun fact about you, Oliver, is that you are awarded the Presidential Volunteer Award, which is awarded in 2010. And you served 170 hours that you volunteered, which is, wow, I mean, such a big deal. Thank you. So last question, and hopefully this is, the ultimate goal for the audience is, what would you like for the audience to learn or take away from this conversation? This is Oliver speaking. I just want them to take away that, yes, we are trans people, we are people in general with rich lives. I mean, there are comedians out here, there are fierce people, and we're talking about trans justice. And I want to see that action actually go about instead of just the conversation. And, we are impacted by different things every day. And, I just want the audience to leave kind of acknowledging that instead of, thinking that trans people is kind of like an abstract concept. But this is Marley speaking. Well said. Well, I won't hold you any longer. Thank you, Oliver, for your time. I am genuinely appreciative. We love you. And you know what? We're going to pass the baton over to you, and the floor is yours. And enjoy. Thank you so much. Okay, this is Alexa speaking. All right, I'm getting out of here. See you later. Okay, this is Oliver speaking. Everyone ready? Hello. My name is Oliver. My pronouns are they, them, or he, him. And I know we briefly touched upon this topic, but if you haven't figured out by now, we were talking about the trans topic, and every culture, has a word for trans people. And so, trans is everywhere. Now we have, we are recognized by cis people. Oh, Reed, you want to help me out? And so interpreter missed that, but we want to explain, take the time now to explain our lives, the joy that we experience, the just general life experience that we may have. Now, I just want to go around and go ahead and introduce yourselves and your pronouns. Hello, my name is Catalea. I use they, them pronouns. I recently graduated and am transitioning into the work world now. Asteria. Hello, folks. My name is Asteria. I am a Black, Indigenous, trans woman. I use she, her, miss pronouns, queen, empress, whatever. I'll take it all. you know. Um, let's see. I'm into fashion, gaming, and so that's just a little bit about me. Chella. Hello, everyone. My name is Chella. I identify as trans masculine and gender queer. I enjoy art. I'm an artist. So I'm excited to be here with you all. This is Oliver speaking. Thank you all for joining. Now, I know we just touched upon about the fact that trans people have been on this earth forever, but has been erased essentially by history. And our stories have been covered, and a lot of our stories aren't recognized. Lately it's been recognized more and more in media, which is a good start. But I'm curious to know where the efforts of representation are missing. Now, I know some of you all are in projects and know much about representation currently. Any of you want to expand on that? This is Catalea speaking. So I guess with me, representation in terms of trans identity, it's typically kept in a box. You know, we are individuals. You don't see, being deaf and trans, or as someone who identifies deaf as trans, you don't see much of that out there. And typically it's kind of separate entities that you may see in social environments. But with media, again, yeah, it just separates people's identities, and it's hard to find them layered. This is Oliver speaking. You mentioned before people who Reed, want to help me out here? Mm. I'm so sorry for the interpreter tech issues. Just unmuting here. I'm so sorry. I missed some of what you're saying, Oliver, so I apologize. Do you mind just, I'm sorry, the interpreter just asking Catalea to repeat themselves. Oh. So in regards to non-binary people, sorry, brain freeze. Sure, I'll just repeat my question. So I met you, Catalea, through a project about the history of Black, deaf, trans people. Now, how come in your experience you've only seen white non-binary people? What kind of evidence have you seen that you kind of put in record? So let's see, recently for me, well, not really recently, but I've been researching a lot more about Marcia P Johnson. And a lot of people, I mean, she's amazing, but a lot of people haven't recognized, you know, her as more as
it's more of a non-binary
non-binary.
person. And you know, that
And
was like part of her whole life. That was a big one for identity. And so I just feel like when I learned that, oh my God, it just opened my world. That was amazing. And that made me really happy. It made me feel like, wow, I was there in history too.
I know, Chella, you experienced a lot because you're you know, in the spectrum. Do you have the same experience? Yeah, I feel like, you know, this session, this panel will be actually really healing for me because I occasionally, I don't have the chance to talk about the topic of trans issues besides with Oliver, but in terms of representation, I mean, thank you. Again, like I said earlier, I'm so happy to be here. So yeah, yes, I've experienced things as well. What was the question, Oliver? I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. You know, with your identity, you're not just one specific thing. You have multiple intersecting identities, and you know, you feel like you don't get the representation that you need. You don't see yourself very much in media. Tell me about that.
I felt really lonely growing up. I mean, especially where I'm from, central Pennsylvania. There's not a lot of people of color there, and or disabled people or Chinese, Jewish. I mean, there's no representation. If that's my point, in that area, especially. But then I remember, I remember, you know, realizing that my community isn't just in one place; it's multiple communities, which is beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I would as a deaf trans person, I don't often see myself represented. Sarah, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, for me, it's interesting. I agree with you, Chella, and Kalea. I mean, the feeling of isolation is relatable. As you know, being a Black, deaf, trans woman. I mean, there's no representation out there, and so that just kind of led me to just create my own kind of representation. You know, no matter what communities are out there, there's no representation of exactly me, and so to be that representation, I feel like can empower others who look up to me, and you know, you find more strength with people who are doing the same thing, and then you kind of develop like a family kind of sense.
You know, making your own representation is a way to see yourself represented in media, and that can be really healing of an experience because you start to see that there's active experience in that. And you know, we struggle and fight against the system, and you know, in multiple ways. Yeah, I agree. I mean, you know, I recognize when I ask people for more representation, the response is like, oh, asking for too much, you know, just represent this one identity. And it's like, no, I want trans, I want deaf, I want Black, I want women, I want non-binary people. I want to see visible disability. I want to see that. But when I put that out to somebody, there's a lot of resistance to it. Nope, you have enough already. Just one identity, that's good enough. And it's like, what? No. I mean, there's no such thing as asking for too much, but we often get told, this is Chella saying, you know, you know, so many people in our lives can support us, and it's possible. It's definitely possible. This is Oliver. Yeah, that idea of collective liberation, that idea of the most oppressed person who is impacted by the various systems of oppression. For example, somebody who experiences racism, transphobia, queerphobia. It focuses on advocating for that one person. So does that mean
everyone experience the same thing? Like, what's the collective liberation? Is collective liberation a theory that you all use?
Area for me specifically in regards to that, I make it a point to collaborate with people who aren't the same as me. So, for example, collaborating with hearing people, with trans people, with trans men, people who have different beliefs than I do, maybe, and
the concept of having a silo kind of mindset, you're preserving all of the information for one community instead of like sharing it out. And I feel like the Black trans community is like any community, yes, trans or whatever, but I just wanted to encourage the idea of collectiveness and doing it together, because it just makes sense to me if we, for example, like Catalea, Chella, or Oliver, if we were to all collaborate together and, would the system be dismantled in one day? No, but I just feel like that's how, white supremacy wins. Exactly. If we're all against each other, if we're all into the idea of oppressing family, right? Black trans people are known to be a lot more oppressive than any other, or more oppressed than any other community. And I'm like, and it depends on situations. There's lots of layers to it, but for me, I think it's important for us to work toward togetherness and collaboration. It's kind of like cherry picking, right? If this person has more cherries than I do, then that means that it's they're in a different place or they're better. I mean, which is not the case. Let's all work together and have an even amount of cherries. And I feel like that kind of mindset has been working so far for us. And I feel like it would be something good to follow for other communities.
This is Oliver. Yeah, I love that. Fighting for each other, all of our strong, collaborating together on them. Yeah. So during our pre-interview call that we had, we talked a little bit about how everyone on this panel has a lot of intersecting identities in the community. Me, I'm deaf, I'm trans, I'm Irish. It's a long list of various identities. But we also identify often with oppression. And for example, Asteria, we were talking about how a Black deaf person has a much different experience with oppression and being under-resourced. So not necessarily just like as a trans person. And so how do we get, different community values to align with each other? So a lot of resources for trans people are made by hearing people for white hearing people. And so what resources can we find that are made by the community for the community? And a lot of times our identities get overlooked. And Asteria, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about getting into Gallaudet, and how that, it's a university specifically for deaf people, and how has your experience of acceptance been there? Yeah, I think one issue, is that white deaf people tend to have more access to education. And, I realized that it can be a little bit of a sticky subject, because when I went into Gallaudet, that was in recently, and was I going to go as a visibly Black trans woman or not? I had to think about. And so you know, I started my medical transition in another state, and you know, that was a learning experience for me. And at the same time, I you know, there weren't a lot of resources to explain to white deaf people how, you know, how to educate on transition with trans people. And you know, it was interesting because even if a lot of resources were only available in English, but there weren't a lot available in sign. And so, you know, that was really tough.
So say if I was dating another person, right, or if this person was, you know, had the occupation of a lawyer or a doctor. Let's see, and one person asked about, you know, my breast specifically, and asked about my top surgery, and hey, when did you have them enhanced and all that. And this person actually asked me that, so that threw me off for a loop. You know, it was at the same time though, I was, you know, kind of excited that they recognized me as a woman, you know, but for them to ask me that kind of question, no, without any meeting beforehand, you know, so I just wanted to, I gave them like kind of like a basics 101 of transitioning, and to explain just the basics of having the estrogen shots and the medication. And, you know, you all know what it is, but yeah, everything that a trans woman can get. And depending on your, you know, generation and all that is different, but let's see. So a lot of people are threatened by the fact that I'm me, and I remember one person who came up to me. They saw like me healing, my recovery after top surgery, and they told me, let's see, I was how old was I? I was in my mid-20s. And that kind of added on to my sexual identity as a woman. And, you know, when I was transitioning, I wasn't sure if I fit what I should look like. And it was really tough for me, even with, you know, dealing with microaggressions, you know, which I feel like people wouldn't do if it was like a white woman or a white trans woman. And so it's just different for me. And this panel right now is really inspiring. And again, community, the definition of community doesn't mean like we all have to look the same or be the same. It's just like we all understand each other, and that's what community is. And so an example like this right now is some kind of community, you know, where the support is there. And 5 minutes of this interaction is a lot more healing than, you know, my years at Gallaudet, and which is sad but true. This is Oliver speaking. Even though, you know, your school, as a deaf person, I mean, Gallaudet is known as a deaf school, so
you know, a lot of people tend to ask super inappropriate questions, and it's like, it's not your business. You're not my partner. So I know that Chella, you know, we talked about, you know, a lot of personal things between us, and specifically about your deaf identity, because you know it took longer to realize that, and then learn more about this community. I don't know if you can speak a little more to that. Yeah, I feel like it was really hard for me to find videos with captions. Like YouTube has so many videos about trans identity and experience, but I was always very binary. And so I also felt like it took me a long time to figure my identity as genderqueer and to understand what that meant for me, because the trans mass representation is always very same. It's very binary. And so it took me a long time to figure out how to disconnect from that binary and figure out my pronouns. So, I mean, I moved to New York and I found my community in person. So I didn't have to rely on online with options anymore. But I think that, the really important part is that, being able to have videos in ASL, have them captioned. I mean, all videos need to have captions, and that's really hard when there are so many sources available that don't have captions on them and aren't available. And I mean, I have high hopes for the future that all videos will become captioned and accessible so that everybody can have the same resources.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I know cis people are saying like, oh yeah, finally trans people are starting to, come out, and but that's not the case. We've always been here,
Yeah.
They just had no idea about it. And, that kind of gives me an idea about the future of accessibility. In an ideal world, right? What would that look like for our community? An ideal version of accessibility. Hard question, I know.
This is Chella. I mean, resources to be accessible, they need to be translated, they need to be captions, they need to be in different languages, they need to be in ASL, they just need to be accessible. Mm-hmm. And me, trans, but I don't need to use a specific kind of pronoun. It doesn't matter what I look like, what my body looks like. And it does, whatever you prefer, do that. Whatever makes you comfortable, do that. There's no limit to your identity and what that manifests as.
Mm-hmm. I just want to add with to the stereo speaking. I just want to add to Chella, economically too. I think it's important to be accessible, to have accessibility to that. Not a lot of people realize have the privilege to have access to an interpreter, or, for me, being a trans woman and deaf, I mean, if I may not have access at home or computer access at home, I'll go to my local library and realize that, oh, there is some trans resources here, and that, and I feel like that's important. I do support that, but I also think that's important for us to journal as well.
If some company like YouTube decided to charge us for something, I mean, charging to be related to access, YouTube wants to charge for actioning. Economically, it's just not accessible for a lot of people. So especially, the whole age range, the whole spectrum, it's not going to be accessible. So, it needs to transition to more of an independent system. And, hopefully we'll see that in the future.
I love that. Catalea?
Yeah, I was thinking about access, is more than just only focusing on trans issues. We also need to talk about, for example, like one big issue is the bathroom issue with trans people. But, what about accessibility for people who are disabled? It's not just a trans issue. And so I feel like when we talk about room access for trans people who are disabled, who have wheelchairs, or can't open the door, or things of that nature. So when we talk about access for trans people, we also need to widen our lens to include everybody. Everybody has needs. Everybody has ability needs. You know what I mean?
Is it just our fight for the restrooms? No, I mean, again, it's everyone's fight for the restrooms. Like, everyone should fight for the trans rights, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some people need help going to the bathroom, and having an open single stall restroom is helpful. Multiple people can enter, or family can enter. If they have some sort of aid that needs to go to the bathroom with them that's a different gender, they can go in with them. It'll be accessible. Yeah.
I know before you've been a big advocate for a gender neutral bathroom. Do you mind explaining why you felt that was so crucial?
Yeah, sure. I mean, really, I don't use the name neutral, but when I mean the word neutral means no, like neuter, but no gender. But when I was a student, I was involved in student government, and sorry, my heart is racing right now. I'm so nervous, and this is a heavy topic. Anyway, so the school, I was in student government, and we were helping to set up restroom was multi-stall and neutral, no gender. And I was interested in that because, I mean, at the time that it was set up, people were angry about it. They were frustrated, they were upset. And I was like, what? You have over 100 other bathrooms that are gender that you can go into. So why is this one restroom a problem for you? Just walk down the hall to a different bathroom. And a lot of trans people tend to not use the restroom because they don't want to go into a gendered restroom, and they'll hold it for hours and hours. They just won't go to the bathroom through them. And now it's time to change that. But I'm also thinking about, a lot of people don't realize that, we're not saying get rid of all gendered bathrooms. We're saying, give us access to a restroom the same that you have.
Exactly. This is Oliver speaking. I'm going to explain a little bit why bathrooms are so important. And for a trans person to walk in the bathroom and to not experience getting picked on, or I feel like the choice of not being picked on or feeling hesitant to walk into the bathroom is a fundamental right for everyone. And it's really small or minute deal to some people, but it's,
And I mean, there are other places who have neutral restrooms, but here in the US, I mean, it's just not a thing the way that it is in some other countries. I'm trying to think, I read somewhere before about a woman who started working, she went into the restroom. There was only a male restroom, and so she would have to leave work to go to the restroom. And then more women joined, and so they made two separate bathrooms. And it's like, anyway, I'm getting off track, but I just want people to understand that the world, I feel like we can't. There are just so many things with trans people that there's so many ways they're excluded from the world, and I just think that as more people change and are visible, the world will hopefully change, meet their needs.
This is Asteria speaking. I remember one trans experience, one trans person had an experience of getting picked on in regards to using a bathroom. And so the interpreter missed that, but
there was like this older woman who, I mean, she said, she was like, oh, like, what are you doing in here? And the woman was, she wasn't a Gallaudet professor, and she was just like, you know, somebody who came to the bathroom. And since then, sorry, the interpreter is seeing parts of this.
I have a problem with the word. So I had an experience in the bathroom, and in the back of my mind, I wasn't sure if someone like was saying something about me being in the women's bathroom, and I'm not sure if like people were kind of just making up conversations about trans women. I mean, I was just going to the bathroom to use it, you know, to pee. I wasn't, you know, trying to invoke anything. And so I just, you know, I went in the bathroom to use the bathroom, do my makeup and all that. And I was advocating for co-ed bathrooms or bathrooms together. Trevor's missing all this. Were you getting this?
No, it's also a lag on mine as well.
You know, in other countries, it's not the same. They just treat gendered bathrooms differently, and so obviously, you know, since other countries are doing it, it doesn't mean the United States have to have separate bathrooms. So. Interpreter missed all of that. Interpreter mistake.
Oliver, so yeah, it's really a big deal. You know, we need to advocate for ourselves. I remember several years ago there was a law, you know, banned people from going into the bathroom because, oh God, we're so scared that a trans person is going to come in and molest children. And it's like, no, there's no evidence of that at all. You know, we're not like that. But a lot of comments were you know, we're not that, but you know, we're trans people, we're just trying to lives, we're just trying to go to the bathroom, wash our hands, like we don't care what we're doing in there.
And you know, this is Catalina speaking. People act as if like you know, we were allowed to go into these bathrooms, and then all of a sudden the law changed, and it's like, no, you can't harm people inside the bathroom. You know, which is something that cis people do all the time. And it's like nothing's changed since the law passed. And you know, trans people have been going into bathrooms all this time. It's just that cis people may have not recognized it or known it.
Yeah, this is over. My favorite thing sometimes that I've noticed, there's like people write on the wall, a trans person peed here, and I'm like, oh, thank you. That is representation. Yes. So I'm gonna transition to another topic now. And as trans people, we often are expected to do a lot of teaching in our lives. doing a lot of education. So, learning how to with us, and often will really take advantage of that, and they tokenize us in the process. So if you were looking back at a time where you felt tokenized, if a cis person in your life wanted to become an ally, and learn how to work with trans people, how to support us and not tokenize us, what would you say to them?
Ask us, right? I mean, straight to the point. I mean, I've been involved in educational work, in educational settings, and there's a lot of workshops out there that are being run, and I feel like if we were to lead them, I mean, compensation is demanded. It's really interesting that that's not something that comes to people's minds, to pay us if you all want to learn about this topic. And again, there are several topics to talk about, but if
you're not going to pay me for my time, buy me a coffee or something, instead of just, having this free labor done for you. Mm-hmm. And again, it's just like, it's not a hard step to pay somebody for their labor. And, it's the parallel I can draw to that is that, if somebody had a specific skill that you were hiring them for, you would pay them. And trans people are the same. We have a specific set. And, we shouldn't be taken advantage of by being expected labor. And I just really want to emphasize that point specifically, and like the deaf community too. We have deaf people, like hearing people like, oh, do you mind teaching a workshop about sign language? And, people will just assume that I'm available instead of asking me. And the same thing happens with, being a trans person. And
the important thing is to communicate. And if cis people were to offer an opportunity like this, a question I would reciprocate with is like, they would ask me what my rate is.
This is Oliver. Yeah, it's important to recognize that, it's not just a one time, oh, do you mind teaching me? It's to us every day. People want us to educate them over and over. So it's important to recognize that, not a one experience, and also the system that we're in, we don't make as much money because of the barriers and bias and discrimination we face as a trans person. So if you're refusing to pay our work, like, what do you expect us to do? What's left for us? Yeah. Chella, you are a publisher who is pretty involved in a lot of presentations and speaking and experience that a lot.
I know most of the questions that people ask me are things that you can Google. What's the difference of like trans versus disabled optics or something like that? Just again, you can Google these things instead of having the person do the work for you. Secondly, also, if me and you became close friends, instead of asking so many questions about my identity, I think it's best if my friend or person, the person that's asking me this question, ask, hey, how can I support you? Because the answers are different, and it's really important that the specific person ask like a general kind of question like that.
This is Oliver. Yeah, you can't make an assumption about what other people need based on what specific person needs. Everybody is different. All situations are different.
Right. And before, I had someone interpret for me. I had someone interpret for me when I didn't ask for an interpreter. So it's just best to ask first.
This is Oliver. Yeah, but we ask trans person, ask your friend Google first. We're more than happy to share experiences most of the time, but it can be really taxing. There's the trans tags, the deaf tags. We have to do a lot more work in our everyday lives. So, yeah. Many commonalities, and all trans people want to pass. They want to be seen as the gender they identify with inside. So, for example, as a trans man going through life, nobody seeing me as a woman. That's what passing means. Or many people think that all trans people want to pass, which is not true. And all trying to do a medical transition, which is also true. And, the idea of passing is that nobody would know that you are a trans man or a trans woman.
I think some of the times, for me, sometimes I do want to pass. For me personally, I think about passing because it's something that is always talked about, it's like understood more, or people accept you more, like, oh, you're trans, yeah, I get it, but for me, passing is like what is it, I'm non-binary, so what?
Yeah, how do you pass as non-binary when non-binary isn't even recognized as a thing?
Exactly. And I think that part was the hardest for me, because I felt like when I thought about the term non-binary before, I thought of white people, and not it necessarily connected to the Black community. And what is it? I can't think of the Poussey, what's the name? Poussey? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, but what's...
Yeah, that Black woman?
Yeah, she's a woman.
Person, sorry.
No, she's not trans. She's a woman, cis woman, but she looks more non-binary to me, but no one mentions it at all, and she like died in the show. Remember the show? Okay, all right. I'll be quiet. I actually didn't see the rest of the season, so okay, I'll be quiet. I won't ruin anything. Sorry. So my point is that she has like a non-binary kind of look, but no one mentions anything about it. Now, a white woman comes in and she starts with I forgot, it starts with an A. I forgot her name, but as soon as she comes in, it's like, oh, non-binary. We can identify exactly what kind of person this is, and it's just like, well, she looks it. She looks non-binary because she's white, whereas Poussey was, I don't know. What the heck is her name? I can't remember. But it's just interesting that people accept non-binary when it's on a white person versus when it's on a Black person. And for me, in my experience, I didn't fit the non-binary definition, so I couldn't be, and that was hard for me. So, but okay. I just cried last night. I don't want to cry again.
This is hysteria. And yeah, because, it's all almost exactly the same representation too. I'm going to diverge to trans women for a minute, but for a Black trans woman, to pass, even when you do, people can still think negative things about you because you're a Black woman. So, living at Gallaudet, I graduated already, but I noticed there, if I was walking around campus or whatever, people
would think I'm a prostitute. And I mean, I have nothing against, you know, sex workers or anything like that. I'm all about it. But, you know, I pass well, but there are still those people who follow the negative stereotypes when it comes to trans women. You know, I may dress a certain way, or how about it? And like, people will have their assumptions. You know, if I would stand in a corner or something, I mean, people would automatically like pull over, and I would see that in the corner of my eye, you know, assuming something. Or, and I know in our community, passing is, I guess, safe in some perspectives, but for others, it's just an added layer that we have to deal with, and it's an extra risk. And I feel like it's kind of double layered, where it's like, hey, you're passing and you're safe in some aspects. You know, you're safe in how society will treat you in general. But I mean, I'm sorry, women kind of already have experienced oppression, but it'll be even an added layer if you're a trans woman. But passing is a dangerous concept to just kind of get rid of, because passing is not, you know, it doesn't guarantee that other trans women will not be murdered in the future years. And so far in the news, we've been seeing lots of murders of trans women, Black trans women specifically. And so far, what I've seen, they've been all passing, but I guess that passing kind of made them targets. And so again, I mean, I think actually that concept should be thrown out, because it doesn't help us. You know, in the community within too, it would cause some tension, because some trans women might feel like, oh, I'm more passing than you, so therefore I'm better than you. Which again, so I just feel like passing as a concept should be thrown out.
Yeah, definitely. This is Oliver. Passing can be about safety. It can be a really big deal for a lot of people. You know, since people often think, oh, all trans want to pass because, you know, because we want to, and you know, sometimes it's just about safety. It can only be about that. And some people don't want to medically transition, and they're still trans. They're still the gender that they are. It doesn't matter if they medically transition or not.
Mm-hmm. I know one thing about me that makes me feel like at ease is, yes, you know, when I spoke at TEDx, and as soon as I was done speaking, someone came up to me and asked me if, like, are you a girl or a boy? And I'm like, exactly, you know, I was like, that's great, you know. And that question I don't get often, but it felt so good to me.
Yeah. This is Chella, and I also feel like if, you know, people focus on the idea that all trans people want to pass, it makes them, you know, lose sight of our differences, our different goals. You know, we all have so many different things we're focusing on in our lives, not only about passing. You know, maybe some of us want that, some of us don't. And I know so many people who do not care. They're focused on other things in their lives. You know, humanize us. We have their interests.
I would much prefer to make puns instead of like have discussions about our identities, and, you know, yeah, let's talk about how awful my jokes are or something like that.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like, you know, a lot of people think like, sorry, the interpreter is missing this.
um, you know, if I'm wearing an outfit, a certain outfit, people would assume like, hey, this is like a trans kind of clothing. And I'm like, no, this is like Asteria. This is Miss, you know, Empress of Illusions kind of swag right here. You know, don't get it misunderstood, baby. It's, this is, I'm an empress, queen, you know, fashionista, all of that. This is my thing, you know, and not like a stereotypical kind of trans woman thing. And people kind of think like we're just obsessed with passing, which is not the case, you know. And that's honestly, I can care less about what they're thinking. You know, if I just went out to eat, right, with a gentleman and I didn't mention my identity or any of that, we'd have a good time and everything would be fine, instead of just talking about the I guess the focal point, I guess, that maybe this person would bring up, which would be my identity.
Yeah, this is all over. I mean, you know, it's a great thing about me. I love being trans, but it's just one facet of my identity. It's one small part of the whole of me.
Exactly.
Okay, so I have one more question to wrap things up. You know, oftentimes many people outside of our community just about our pain and our suffering and our trauma, tragic stories in the media, people being kicked out by families, all of that. And, you know, we just discussed a lot of that. You know, trans people have full lives. So, you know, I want to have an end note of joy. So what makes this community special to you? Why are you proud to be trans? What brings you joy as a trans person? I know it's a hard.
So many things, so many things. I feel like being trans, that identity has taught me so much of the other identities there are in the spectrum. It's not just, you don't, and not one person just fits in a box.
I mean, society teaches us that everyone can fit in a box and everybody can fit in a box, but we don't. And trans should be that, really that, you know. I believe that those categories and labels that exist, you know, I mean, who I am as a
sorry, being trans taught me, you know, everything, and I'm just really appreciative of that.
Yeah, that. Oh, go ahead.
For me, being trans was exciting. Why? Because, you know, it challenged people in society. And I say that because, you know, I don't mind having my fun confronting cis men, you know, and I support, you know, the Black kings and all that, but to have the power to resist their expectations is empowering. And you know, I can wear what I want to wear. And I actually had an experience where, you know, someone came up to me and asked if I can fix my top, you know, fix myself. And, you know, I looked at them side-eyed like, I'm not doing this for you. You know, you live your life based on societal expectations, and you have your expectations of me and what societal norms I'm supposed to follow. But for me, I can care less. If I'm wearing something that may show some cleavage, or that's just me. I mean, I know I have a nice body, and you're obviously recognizing that, so thank you. But my point is like, that's the power that I have, and I acknowledge that. No matter what I may show in the spectrum, the clothing that I have, when people look at it, people look at it, as I mentioned before, like a prostitute or someone. But it's just like, I'm like, why are you so salty? People are really mad. You know,
Yeah, I think for me, it's helpful to keep an open mind, especially for kids growing up. We can teach kids young about, the depth of people's lives, and I can accept myself, accept the way I am. Um, that's really helped me a lot, and that is something is really great about this community. I will say, I don't feel like we can, we're not as a community. So, there's still people who have closed minds, even in the trans community. But for me, it's been a liberating experience. And just thinking about youth and how we can impact them, because to me, I just want people, adults, to know that there are trans people who are young and whose selves, I saw myself when I was young, even though my parents didn't. And so I just feel like empowered to be able to speak that for, speak out and be myself for the kids.
I know, you're gonna make all the little trans children so happy. So I love being trans, because if not, then I would not be able to have this opportunity, this conversation with you all beautiful people. Um, and you're giving the people so much. You're contributing so much to the community.
Yeah,
so with that, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. Bye-bye now.